Alright, so continuing on with being able to style our JavaFX applications with CSS, we're going to take a look at being able to add some color to our applications. So CSS is going to be using the Rgb Color System, meaning that a color is going to be defined by specifying some amount of red, green, or blue within the range of 0 to 255 for each one of those three different colors. So this means that we're going to have 1 byte of data for each of the three colors, or to represent the entirety of that color, so all of our red, green, and blue for it, it's going to take 3 bytes of data. So there are a couple of different ways that we can specify this in our CSS. So the first notation that we see right here, we're going to see that pound symbol or hashtag, and then RR, GG, and BB. Those are being used to represent where we're going to place the value for our red, green, and blue. So the first 2 digits that we put in there, they're going to be in hexadecimal, and it's going to be for the amount of red. The next 2, again in hexadecimal, it's going to be for the amount of green, and then the last 2, those are going to be for the amount of blue. So if we're doing it from 0 to 255 in hexadecimal, that means it's going to be anything from 00 up to FF. The next notation, we've got something that looks kind of like a method in Java. So we've got this RGB and then a pair of parentheses, and then we've got our placeholders to specify our amount of red, green, and blue. So for each one of those, we're going to put in the amount that we want to use. In this case, it's going to be in decimal, so it's going to be anything from 0 to 255 for each one of those 3 different values. And then the last one that we're going to have is going to be for our what are known as predefined names or named colors. So there are actually several names for colors that already exist as part of the CSS, and we can just go ahead and pick one of those to specify that name, and we'll just go ahead and set the color to whatever color is associated with that name. So go ahead and take a quick look at each one of these 3 different ways that we can approach this. So we'll come back over here. Let's go look at the demo itself. So remember from the previous video, we put together this piece of Java code where we're just displaying this label hello world. If we look in the style, our style sheet, we can see all of the style that we're currently applying to it. So we made it cursive, which may or may not work depending on your machine. We also specified the font size, the font style, the font weight, and the border style. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just add another line to this. So to see a little bit about what that's going to look like, so here's an example using each one of those 3 different notations. So in this case, for these 3 examples, these are all different ways to specify that the color of our labels, the text for it, should be in red. So the rule, or the property itself that we're going to be using is this FX text fill. So that's how we specify a color for our text and labels. So the first one, we see we've got our pound symbol and then FF0000. So this one's indicating that we want as much red as we can possibly put into it, and then no green and no blue. You can also see this in the second notation where we do RGB and that pair of parentheses, and then we're doing 25500. So again, as much red as we can apply, and then no green and no blue. And then finally, if we want to do it with just the named color, then we would just put the name red. So we'll take a look at that example, plus go through a little bit more. So we'll go ahead and just add it right here. So we're going to do FX text fill. And so we'll go ahead and start off with the hexadecimal notation. So we're going to have that pound symbol. Then we're going to do FF and then 0000. We'll go ahead and save this, and we'll run it. And so we can see now the text has been changed to red. Close that. So let's say I want to go ahead and modify this. Maybe I want to do a different color. So we'll go ahead and just zero out the first part. And let's go ahead and change it so that now we're doing all green. So we'll do 00FF00. So we're not going to have any red or any blue, but we'll have all green. Go ahead and run that. And we can see now that our text is green. And then again, one more example. We'll zero this out, and let's do it with the very last one. And so if we do all blue, no red, no green. Go ahead and run that. And we can see now that our text is blue. And then if you want to, you can also kind of play around with these values to try to come up with any color of your own. So one example might be if we want to do, let's say, all red and all blue. So this would make it more of a purple color. But then maybe we also want to go ahead and make that a slightly lighter shade. So it'll be something closer to being maybe like a magenta or a pink color. So we could go ahead and do something like 7-7 right here. So if we try this, go ahead and save it and run it, then what we end up with is this more pink colored text. Close that. So now let's take a look at the next notation, which is going to be that RGB. Then have that pair of parentheses, and then inside of here we're going to put in the decimal form of our three values. So we're going to do 255 and then 00. This would be if we wanted to just be all red, no green, no blue. Go ahead and run that. And we can see we've got our red text right here. Close that. And then if we want to, we can just kind of modify this. Do something like 0, 255, 0. This would be all green. We run that. See that our text is green. Or we can do something like 00, 255. So this would be all blue, no red or no green. And our text comes out blue. And again, if we want to try to capture that sort of pinkish color, like I demonstrated with the hexadecimal notation, we're going to do all red and all blue, so both of those will be 255. For the green, I did 7-7, which is meant to be roughly in the middle. So if we do about the halfway point here, it'd be about 123. So if we go ahead and run this, so we get something that looks kind of like the color I had before. I'm pretty sure that if you were to compare these side by side with what I did in hexadecimal, I think this one's a shade darker. But other than that, they look about the same. And then finally, we can also have our named colors. So one example of this was to just do red. So we'll go ahead and run that. So if we do just the word red, that'll make the text red. If we do just the word green, we can make the text green. And if we do blue, we can go ahead and make the text blue. And as you probably noticed as I was typing these names out, there's the autofill in NetBeans that was trying to recommend some other colors that I could also use. So if you want to actually see that complete listing, keep in mind we have that CSS reference guide for JavaFX. And inside of there, let's go to the very top to show how to actually navigate to this. So at the very top, when you have the contents right here, if you come over to types, and at the very bottom, you're going to see this color. So if you click on that, that'll immediately navigate you to the color section of that reference guide. And inside of here, you can see all of the different named colors. And they also take the time to show the hex value for it. So you can see like this Alice Blue, for example, has F0, F8, FF. So I'll try to pick out a color that captures the one that I've been using. So one example of this, I think that gets pretty close to it, is this plum color that looks fairly similar to the example I've been using. So if we go ahead and add that in right here, save that, we'll run it. And so we can actually see that color right here. One thing I'll note about this plum color though is that it uses slightly less red or blue. You can actually see that in its hex value right here. It's using DD for both the red and the blue. So because of that, the way that it comes out, it's not quite as noticeably pink. I would say that it's probably closer to being having a more of a grayish hue to it than what I've been using. But other than that, it gets pretty close. So what I'll go ahead and do is leave in each one of these different examples. So I'll go ahead and comment out the named color version. And we'll also go ahead and keep each of the other two. So for this one, we can include the RGB version of what I was doing, which is 255, 123, 255. And then for this one, we can use the hex notation. So this was FF 77FF. Okay. So in this way now it can serve as more of a guide where you can see each one of the 3 different types as a reference. Alright, so this will finish up everything for colors and CSS. In the next video, I want to take a moment to go into a little bit more detail about these different kinds of selectors that we can use so that we can actually see other things besides just selecting maybe every control of a particular type. I want to get into ways that we can be more specific with our selections or possibly even more general with our selections.